Welcome back to Fault Lines. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined by my co-host Shane Stranahan, coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. Joining us for a great conversation on Myanmar. He has informed our opinion on this particular subject greatly, and he is bound to do so again. KJ No. KJ No is a journalist, political analyst, writer, and teacher specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia Pacific region. He is a contributor to the book Capitalism on a Ventilator, once censored by Amazon, is now available at iacenter.org. KJ, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Absolutely. I want to get directly into what has been taking place from the standpoint of the latest in Myanmar. There have been a large number of people that have basically died recently, even as late as recently as today. 5 people were apparently killed today, if I'm not mistaken, or 12 over the weekend, with a number that seems to be increasing. The public doesn't necessarily seem to be taking this lying down. And what's more interesting in this, I think, has to do with the idea of democracy, and Suki coming in as a democratic leader. And then with the elections that basically go in large measure to her party, even though they were called fraudulent. It seems that the public is looking at this from a perspective of once having it, not wanting to give it up. And that's why seems so difficult to put down the public and its resistance to this coup. Is that what it is? That the moment that they were able to taste this notion of we have some agency, we have some choice in the direction of this country, that is not something they want to give up, even to the degree of losing lives to defend it.
Yes, it's complex, but yes, certainly what you're saying is correct. There were 12 deaths on Saturday, including 5, if I'm not mistaken, in Mandalay, and Sunday there've been between 5 and 28 deaths. So the death toll is not yet confirmed, but this has to do with the fact that this is the anniversary of the death of a student in 1988 at the Rangoon Institute of Technology. This was kind of like their Kent State moment, and that resulted in a massive uprising against the military in '88 that resulted in at least 3,000 killed, possibly more. So this is the anniversary of that, and of course there have been massive protests against the military coup, and as a result of that we see this massive bloodshed. What is interesting right now is, as you point out, the shifts that are happening. There is the acting vice president of the NLD, Man Win Kang Tam. He has declared essentially a government in exile or a government in hiding, the CRPH, the Commission for Representing the Union Parliament. And he's calling for solidarity with all the armed ethnic organizations. Now remember, Myanmar has 21 armed ethnic organizations. Some of these are powerful armies that have actually held onto large areas of liberated territory inside Myanmar itself. They've essentially, stalemated the military. Now, Man himself is a Karen, so he's an ethnic minority, and he's also a Christian, which is an interesting, development. He was just a legislator before, but now the NLD has made him acting vice president, and he's made this call for a federal democracy, and he's calling for a revolution. So this is clearly an appeal to the armed ethnic organizations to join the fray. We'll see how this pans out, because we have to watch out. We have to see how the AEOs respond. And my feeling is they will not all be on board. And the other point is that we'll have to see whether this government in exile is recognized. So these are some of the factors going on right now.
And the AEOs that you're talking about, the armed ethnic organizations, you say that not all of them are necessarily lumping themselves in with Man's cause. How many show signs of doing so? And if they were to do that, I mean, with the military coup government pushing back against them, they would be pushing back specifically against ethnic groups. If that goes overboard, if they go overboard in their response, that could very quickly turn into allegations of genocide, because again, these are along ethnic lines. I'm trying to throw in a couple of different sort of topics here, but KJ, what's your take on that generally? Where do you see that going? I mean, if it continues, if it accelerates into an ethnic conflict where it was formerly just a sort of a political one between the military and the leadership of Myanmar, what are your concerns and what prospects does that open up in terms of the political development of Myanmar?
Well, I think it pushes the country towards more and more chaos. I already mentioned, that this is really a crossfire hurricane. And, regarding the charges of genocide, I mean, it's not unreasonable to state that genocide is already happening against the ethnic minorities. I mean, at the very least, an ethnic cleansing. We know, in Rakhine State, of course, we had, the ethnic cleansing of the Rohingya, but also there are 200,000 Rakhine who have been displaced, 200,000, Rakhine IDPs. And the Karen, there's somewhere between 100 to 400,000 that have also been displaced. So this has been ongoing. And these death rates that we're talking about right now, although they seem, horrific, and they are, they have been happening daily against the ethnic minorities as well. Now, to complexify the issue is the fact that, for example, one of the largest armed ethnic organizations is the Arakan Army. This is a Buddhist, this is the armed ethnic organization representing the Buddhist minorities in Rakhine State. And they are between 50 and 100,000 strong. They are a serious, contender for power. And what's interesting is that the Burmese military has just stated that the Arakan Army is no longer a terrorist organization. In other words, they're seeing, the Rakhine as a potential ally. And of course, this is the complexity of it, is that the NLD, which is primarily a Burmese majority political party, has, for the most part, excluded the ethnic minorities from having a really inclusive governance. And now that they have been cracked down on the military that they were holding to their chest, now they're reaching out to the ethnic communities. I think that it will be a very complex chessboard.
With both sides, KJ, with both sides reaching out to ethnic minorities. I just wanted to come in one quick comment on the Arakan Buddhist militias that you're talking about. 50 to 100,000 strong. Those are large numbers. Aren't they also known as perpetrators historically of the violence against the Rohingya? Weren't they, along with the government, some of the most prominent enactors of violence that led to the Rohingya refugee crisis and how most people would have heard about Myanmar over the last, say, half decade period? KJ.
The Arakan Army was formed in 2005. Its early beginnings were in 2005. It really didn't operationalize until much, much later. And the persecution against the Rohingya has been ongoing since the beginning of the Burmese state. The main force oppressing both the Rakhine Buddhists and the Rohingya has been the Burmese military. So I don't think that's an accurate portrayal. But of course, there have been clashes between ARSA, which is considered to be, ISIS-aligned army that is related to the Rohingya and the Arakan Army. So once again, a very complex situation, but we're looking at a diverse, complex chessboard, many factors playing, and the possibility for massive chaos. Right now, as we speak, there is. It looks like the Karen look to be, taking up arms against the Burmese military. They always have, but right now they seem to be joining.
And just to make this a little bit more complex,
sorry.
And just to make this a little bit more complex, the vision of Suu Kyi. I mean, basically, yes, a democratic figure. But there are reports that she was far more adamant with going after the Rohingyas and even the military itself. Um, I mean, you could speak on that, on whether those reports were true. I mean, some of the conversation or some of the stuff that I read, it was even concerns that she was taking so much power that she was becoming almost like a dictator in and of herself, meaning trending in that direction. Like, it's not as it's strange. She's considered a democratic figure, but by the same token, some of the actions that she's taken is considered this kind of consolidation of power. Before we get into her additional charges, do you want to speak on that one for a moment?
Yes, well, the charges are clearly, they're just trying to pile anything on. It's the typical overcharging that you see in courts in the United States. They're trying to throw something and see if it will stick. So the most recent charges is that she's taken $600,000 in bribes and 11 kilograms of gold. That's very odd in its specificity. So, they want to maintain her detention. They want to put pressure on her. But as you point out, once again, Aung San Suu Kyi was a flawed figure, clearly a politician. She had, large ambitions. When her party won in 2015, she took on 5 cabinet positions, 5 ministries for herself as a single individual. I mean, there's a kind of oversized ambition there, as well as being designated state councilor, which is extra constitutional leader of the country. She's not the president because the Constitution forbids her from doing that. Now, she did dial back on some of the ministry positions because she's not qualified to hold all of those positions by herself. But she was clearly a flawed individual. She held the military too close to her, banking on her father's relations with the military. Her father founded the military itself. And yes, she was intimately responsible for the crackdown on the Rohingya and the Rakhine. Partly, if for no other reason, that a lot of the repression was not simply military. It was a fourfold strategy. It was no food, no information, no recruitment, and no funding. It was a very coordinated strategy, and that kind of coordinated strategy involves the cooperation of all the ministries that were held.
KJ, we only have about a minute left. Thank you for joining us, and thank you again for the great overview. One of the latest bits of news coming out is that a number of Chinese factories, I've seen as few as 2 and as many as 10, a number of Chinese factories were set ablaze and hit. Again, these are Chinese-funded factories in Myanmar. It's unclear who's responsible, but nevertheless, one of the larger sort of global issues we've been weighing on this is if the United States or the UN or China decided to get involved, what that would look like. How much more likely do you think it is at this point that China will decide to get involved if factories they funded are being harmed? KJ.
Well, the Chinese have asked or called for an end to the violence. And my understanding is that there are 4 garment factories and a fertilizer plant that are being set on fire, and also attacks on Chinese staff. And this is a very interesting tactic. This is the kind of tactic we saw in Hong Kong, was that there was a blocking of the fire engines trying to put out the fire by quote-unquote protesters. And there's also been damaging of rail lines in Kachin State and threats to destroy pipelines. So clearly, there is an indigenous resistance to a coup, tremendous anger, and also there's weaponization through a kind of milk tea color revolution alliance that clearly the U.S. or the NED is supporting. We see this in the massive English signs. Most people in Myanmar don't speak English, but all their protest signs are in English.
For an international audience, for an English audience, and that's one of the larger points. Exactly, KJ. Right. I'm cutting in because we're out of time. Thank you again for joining us. We never have enough time to go into detail, but we're always glad to have you on to talk about it. For those listening, KJ No is a journalist, political analyst, writer, and teacher specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia-Pacific region. He is a contributor to the book Capitalism on a Ventilator. Once censored by Amazon, it's available now at iacenter.org. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We're going into a break, but we'll be back in a minute with headlines in the last hour of today's show. KJ, thank you again. Really appreciate it, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you. I appreciate it. Shane, I will talk to you in the morning. And KJ, again, thank you, man. I always appreciate these conversations. I always learn so much because they don't cover
Thank
this
you.
in mainstream media. Like it's
Yeah,
always
absolutely. You
like
guys are doing a great job. Just covering it the way you are and staying on it. It's really fantastic, and I appreciate what you're doing.
very cool, man.
Thank you for so consistently being willing to join us again whenever we can. We want to get you on. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
all right, guys. Y'all have a good one. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye bye. All right, you guys are getting a preview of basically an interview that's going to take place tomorrow. Caleb Maupin. So, Freak Thinker, we've tried. Caleb Maupin has COVID right now. I hope it's okay with me saying that, but he has COVID. We tried to get him on for Monday. He was supposed, more than likely, he would have came on. But no, he's ill. He's not apparently bad off, but he's ill. So he's not necessarily can't do the show. But yeah, once he's well, he'll be back on. Yeah, Lisa, same. Feel the same. Yeah, I could listen to Caleb talk for an hour on anything. That's how good he is. Caleb is phenomenal. That should be the all-time motto of American media. Well, look, we try to give honest takes. And we try to engage it honestly from the perspective of, if you don't like wars, how do you look at the world? And, you find that that's somewhat of a different perspective. Or if you're sitting on the moon looking at events and you have, you try to envision a world that is less hostile, less volatile, less people are dying, more people are well, more people have their needs met, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then how do you do that? And what does that look like? And what is the point of view to get there? That's the way I think I try to do the show. And if I'm being honest, I think Shane looks at the show in similar terms. It's context. This is your world. This is what they don't want you to see because they want you to have a point of view, not necessarily to come away with a contextual understanding of the events. And so when we're covering anything, whether it's Myanmar, whether it's something that's taking place in the States or abroad, we try to take that framing and point of view to it. The Myanmar thing, there's some things that are just complicated and that right and wrong don't apply. Out the window. And oftentimes when you get into wartime situations, right and windows, right and wrong, out the window. You get into issues of power. I'm trying to win this particular contest, and I need to do what's necessary to win this contest. If I need to kill that guy, if I need to kill that group, if I need to put a knife into that priest, then I'll do it, if it means to win. And at the end of it, when all of it's tallied and everything else, I would at least have won with all of the things that are leveled against me. And honestly, depending on how you win, the level of power you get after you win, there will be no consequence for whatever you do to get there. Yeah, it's grim. It's gritty. And Myanmar is fucking complicated. Like, even with with Suu Kyi, like the politics, the things that she was doing that didn't entirely make the American audience and stuff like that, where it's this notion of power management, trying to take power, especially undermining the power of the military while on some level being close to the military. I mean, they're the guys with the guns. How do you take power and undermine the guys with the guns in a way that they don't realize that you're trying to take that power and that they will take out their guns and point them to your head and say, stop? And I guess in this very particular case, that arrangement didn't work for her. They pulled out the guns. They put it to her head and they said, stop. And all of this other violence and everything else associated with it is basically the public trying to reconcile what's taking place. So I'm going to end this here. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I am going to say subscribe. Thanks all. I may see you today. Most likely, I'll see you tomorrow.